Ni hao, and welcome to tonight's international cinema event. And it's a doozy. You're gonna love it because it's mostly a martial arts film. What is this professor dude really using a kung fu flick in class for credit? Sure, why not? It is mostly a martial arts film, but it has this nice historical background drama that kind of works. There's enough elements in there of real value that I can weave it into an educational spin for you. So tonight's film is called Ip Man, not to be confused with many other iterations of Ip Man. This is Ip Man that came out in 2008. It's about 108 minutes long. Again, not to be confused with Ip Man 2, Ip Man 3, or probably 2 or 3 or 10 different versions of Ip Man the TV show now playing somewhere in China. Nor to be confused with Grandmaster Ip Man, which just came out in 2013. This is Ip Man the original. And I know what you're thinking already. What? There's a whole bunch of different versions of this film that just came out 5 or 6 years ago? Yes, it was wildly popular in China, wildly popular in Asia as a whole, I believe, but you've never heard of it. Well, maybe you have. I mean, we live in a global age and there's stuff on the internet, so maybe you've heard of it. I bet you many of you still haven't, though. I had not myself ever heard of it until in 2008, 2009, 2010, a whole bunch of Chinese students kept saying, "Boyer dude, Professor dude, you gotta check this film out, it's awesome." And I thought, a martial arts flick, and then I watched it and I'm like, okay, this is pretty good. It's interesting. It's pretty good. It is mostly a martial arts film, but we can spin some good learning into this, and let's do that now. So, Ip Man from 2008 is a semi-autobiographical, which means that it's loosely based, very loosely based, on the events in a life of a real dude called Yip Man. Yes, that's his name, Yip Man. This is not like Superman for China. It's Yip Man. That's the guy's name. It's shortened to Ip Man for this film. You'll see Yip and Ip in different spellings in different places. Now, Ip Man was, again, a real-life human, and he was a master of the martial art named Wing Chun. Wing Chun, not Wang Chung. That's the old 80s band. Everybody going to Wang Chun tonight? No, you're going to Wing Chun tonight watching this film. And it's a style of martial art. Now, I am not a specialist in martial arts by any stretch of the imagination. But I do want you to kind of start to know this. Maybe some facts for a quiz here and there. Is that it is supposed to take place, the film is supposed to take place in Foshan, which is in the Guangdong province, way down there southeast China. Now, Guangdong province, big place, hugely populated, rich place, huge trading center, has been for the last couple thousand years. And it also, in my mind, is kind of the epicenter of southern Chinese culture. And I'm telling you that so you'll understand some of the opening parts of this film. Is that Guangzhou is the major city down in Guangdong. It's the capital. And Guangzhou is sometimes referred to as, its Western Romanized spelling is Canton. You ever heard of Canton? Have you heard of Cantonese cooking? Cantonese Chinese restaurant? Why am I saying all this? Because the South, this part of the South is a kind of an epicenter, again, of southern Chinese culture. China's a big place, just like the United States of America, and there's the Northwest there, and southern culture in the United States, and California Western Coast culture, and in the middle of the country culture, and you have that in China too. It's a really big country, and so there are different pockets or parts of different cultural styles. Guangdong being the center, I believe, of the southern style. Again, southern style of cooking, like Canton. But for this film, they're going to be referencing southern styles of martial arts. And at one point, some northern roughnecks are going to come down to challenge the southerner style. But maybe I'm saying too much already. So, Guangdong province, down in southeast. Center of southern culture, and was then and is now still an epicenter of martial arts. You're going to see that depicted in the film as well. Lots of different schools of martial arts practicing their different styles here and there and everywhere. And most, and this is real life now, it's depicted in the movie, but it's still kind of true in today's world. Lots of different variations in schools of specific southern martial arts style in and around Guangdong and the major cities of the Guangdong province. And this place, particularly Hong Kong, has always been the epicenter of martial arts film production. So there is this realistic element to it, but this is a historical piece. Let me get back to the historical piece. Yip Man's a real guy. He was a real master martial artist in this one style, one school called Wing Chun. The film's supposed to take place in Foshan, which is in Guangdong province, and it's mostly a martial arts film, but it's really, the educational spin is, it's showing you a depiction, albeit slightly glorified for the big screen, a depiction of how life in Foshan and Guangdong province changed during the Japanese occupation during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Now, we call that, in the West, we call it World War II, but every country has their different takes and different battles and different wars and different names for things. So what we call Japan's component of World War II taking over Asia and the Pacific, the Chinese had a first Sino-Japanese War and a second Sino-Japanese War, and you're going to see the life and times of Foshan and vicinity during that period of Japanese imperial occupation during what we call the back end of World War II. Let's look at the geography of Foshan real quick, and then just a little bit more about the Sino-Japanese War, the second one, that is. So Foshan, I've already tipped you off. It's down in the Guangdong province. Let me say these things slow so you get it. Guangdong province, or Guangdong, I think. Guangdong province, which is kind of like a state. There's 50 states in the United States. Guangdong is a province of China. It's a particularly rich one, by the way. It's always been an epicenter of Chinese trade. 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, maybe longer, I don't know. I've already pointed out Guangdong is heavily populated and kind of an epicenter of southern culture as well. Foshan is a section, okay? You know what? We can just call it a city. The Chinese call it a prefecture-level city, which means it's not a full-fledged city like New York, but it's an administrative unit. And it's an administrative unit, an area, okay, of the Guangdong province that's right next door to Guangzhou. Now, Guangzhou is important because that's the place I already told you. It's sometimes referred to as Canton. It was in the past. It's more referred to as Guangzhou, its original name now. Guangzhou is the capital and largest city of Guangdong province in southern China. And Guangzhou is a major city. It is a city. Foshan is, again, is kind of an administrative unit, second-tier city right beside Guangzhou. And that's because this whole area down here, the Guangdong province, as I've suggested, is mega-populated. I don't know how many tens or hundreds of millions. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to test you on that. But consider it like a one gigantic, huge, urbanized area. Just a concrete jungle, the whole thing. Because they're all big port cities. Now, I've mentioned a couple already. I want you to know. Foshan is where they're supposed to be at. Guangzhou is the capital and bigger and more important city right off to its east. But there's also other couple cities in this area you've heard of, namely Hong Kong and Macau. And all of this huge urban agglomeration is the Pearl River Delta region. So I think the Pearl River, and it's not even a major, huge, long river, but it really pulls in all the trade from the countryside down here in southeastern China, and it all flows out through Foshan, Guangzhou, Hong Kong, Macau. Got it? So one big, huge Pearl River urban agglomeration delta with millions and millions of people and tons of money. Guangzhou is the third largest Chinese city, period. Again, and it's just this one section of this whole Guangdong province I'm talking about. And I think it's the richest. If it's not the richest, it's the top 3 richest Chinese cities as well, because, take-home point here for geography and history of China, all of this area that I've now referred to, the Pearl River Delta region with Foshan, Guangzhou, Hong Kong, Macau, it has been forever a trading epicenter of southern China, pulling in the silks and teas and spices of the surrounding countryside and flowing through, and international trade. Most international trade into China for hundreds of years flowed into this Guangzhou area. So massively important, massively populated, massively rich, and indeed, as all urban areas around the planet, massively cosmopolitan, highly cultured. And you're going to see that in this film, even though it's set almost 100 years ago. It's like, this is a wealthy place. Yes, there's poor people, just like there's poor people in New York City, there's poor people in LA, and there's poor people in London. But there's a concentration of wealth and an upper class level and a middle class level. I mean, this was a very vibrant, flourishing, huge urban agglomeration for hundreds of years, if not thousands. Now let's pull it in and see it get destroyed in this film. Because this film is showing you the before and after of the impact on Foshan of the Second Sino-Japanese War. For the official stats keepers, the Second Sino-Japanese War was from 1937 to 1945. And again, in our minds, like 37 to 45, I thought World War II was 1939 to 1945. Yes, that's when the United States got involved. But it had already started in Japan's imperial rise and its attempted conquest of all of Asia, and specifically China. So the Second Sino-Japanese War, which we can tack to 1937, it's really the result of a decades-long Japanese imperialist policy to dominate the Asian mainland, specifically China, but dominate the entire Asian continent, with plans to take over Australia and go all the way over to India, but it really started in earnest taking over China first. Because the Japanese needed those resources, they needed the labor, they wanted the stuff. They wanted to control this gigantic country, which had, for most of history, been the epicenter of Asian trade and Asian economy and Asian everything. So it's called the Second Sino-Japanese War because there was actually a first. It's more of an incident. The first Sino-Japanese War was from 1894 to 1895, and maybe you remember some of this from reading the chapter on Japan or China. I probably referenced it in both. The 1894 or 1895 fight between China and Japan was mostly over control of the Korean Peninsula, and it was at that point that the Japanese they had just started. This was one of the first fights they picked in their rise to attempted global or Asian domination. And so when they picked this fight with China, it was quite intentional. They were doing it over Korea, which China didn't own, but Korea was always kind of a vassal state of China. And Japan wanted the resources there and the labor there, and so they picked a fight and took it over. And that's, of course, in northeastern China. Why do I place it geographically? Because you'll hear reference in this movie to the Marco Polo Bridge incident of July 7th, 1937. That was the spark at which the full Second Sino-Japanese War started. Let me go back just one second. The first Sino-Japanese War was a complete crapshoot. The Japanese dominated it. They took over the Korean Peninsula in days or weeks. I don't even know if it was that long. And the Chinese were forced to capitulate. It was the beginning of the full decline and deterioration of China in the 20th century. So they lost that war to Japan. They lost control of the Korean Peninsula, and therefore the Japanese are up there in what's now Korea, building up troops, building up arms, building up steel industries, building up everything in preparation for this Marco Polo bridge incident. And I only mention it because it was a farce. The Japanese basically picked a fight on purpose and probably started shooting first and probably did anything to bait some Chinese troops to shooting at them, and then use that as the preconditions for invading China, which they started in Manchuria, which is up in northeastern China, there in 1937. And again, it's not often known, but it's the largest Asian war in the 20th century, with hundreds of thousands of Japanese troops coming across the borders and taking over coastal China, the major cities first. It started in Manchuria, but it's going to go all the way down the coast. And here's where hopefully you've learned a few other things in this class, like the rape of Nanking or the Nanjing Massacre, which is referenced in a couple chapters. A 6-week period where Japanese imperial forces came into Nanking in December of 1937 and just for 6 or 7 weeks just looted and raped and pillaged and destroyed this place and killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, just lined them up and killed them. Maybe 250,000, maybe 300,000 people who died just in that incident. And I'm now staging it. So 1937, they invade Manchuria. By late 1937 and in 1938, they've invaded Nanjing, and we're just going going southerly down the coast, and they get to Foshan and Guangdong by 1938. And that's referenced in the film. October 1st, 1938, the Japanese show up. So up to that point in the movie, and we're looking at like the first 35 minutes, it's like a martial arts film, and it's great. And then it gets all serious because now it turns into a semi-war flick, and you see what happens after the Japanese invade. They destroy factories, buildings, and infrastructure, killing people on the street. Any resistance was met with overwhelming, brutal force. The population of Foshan district went from 300,000 to 70,000 as people just either got killed or fled the premises altogether. And you're going to see, and they make it, it's almost like a Wizard of Oz type of thing in reverse. It goes from a color, rich, vibrant city beforehand in color, and then it kind of goes to black and white after the Japanese invasion because everything looks destroyed, and it was. And the Japanese really set up shop there, keep some industry open, mostly to continue to extract resources from the Chinese countryside, but also only keeping the factories open that they need for their war effort to continue to roll over the rest of Asia. So you're going to see this, and I'm actually wrapping it up now. What you're going to see is a great martial arts flick and a certain style of martial arts that I'd never heard of till I saw this film, based roughly on the life of a real person. And the background is some actual historical stuff that actually did happen during what we call World War II. What for the Chinese is the Japanese imperial invasion of their country, which led to a general bloodletting, slaughter, and period of misery from 1937 to the official end of the war in 1945. How much of the story post-Japanese invasion is true? Probably not that much, but it's a good little story and a great depiction of what war looks like on the ground for civilians. This is not a war film. It's a bunch of civilians in a Chinese province, in a Chinese city that is occupied by the Japanese as of 1938. Cool? Watch the film. We'll come back to wrap up some details of the master martial artist depicted in the film, as well as the results of World War II on China and the Chinese mind, and what that has to do with making pictures just like this one that hopefully you will enjoy.